This is Twit.
You had your favorite laptop of 2019. What was your pick?
The T490s, actually, of all things. Lenovo ThinkPad. This is in the T series. It's not ultra slim by Apple standards like the MacBook. It's not even as slim as Lenovo's own X series, but it's a lot thinner than the older T series parts, kind of their flagship business laptop back in the day. I remember Ryan using a T series, like 400 series laptop or an X200 series laptop. And these were a little bit bigger. They had full-size connectivity options and things that we're just not used to seeing in what they call a thin and light these days, the former Ultrabook classification of things. And we just talked about that XPS 13, which has only basically space for USB-C ports on the side. I think there's like 2 on one side and a headphone jack. And that's kind of the standard small laptop these days. What was interesting to me about this T490s was the T490 was already a slimmer version of a T-series laptop from Lenovo anyway. And then the T490s was even slimmer, but it didn't lose things like a full-size HDMI out on the side, a regular full-size USB 3.1 port, in addition to a pair of Type-C ports, which included Thunderbolt 3.
Right. And
you even have it technically has a NIC, so you can use regular wired Ethernet with it, but you needed an adapter because they had to use a small port on the side that required an optional adapter. But everything else is there right on the side of the laptop. It's extremely functional. And the thing is, and I used this throughout the summer. I sent this back when I finished my evaluation of it. I'd been kind of sitting on this for a while. But looking back on it, of all the laptops I used, this one kind of had everything because it was thick enough that it had a big battery, but it wasn't so thick that it was hard to move around. It was fairly thin, although they're much thinner laptops, but it was thin enough that it fit in any bag, and it only weighed 2.8 pounds. It was so thin so light when I first picked it up, it almost felt like a shell, like there's no computer in here. And they're strong. Like it felt stronger than the X series parts that I've used, where you could almost flex the lid if you were pushing hard enough. So I like it when there's a little bit more thickness just for rigidity. And the battery life was great. I did 2 different battery tests. PC Mark 10 has 3 different battery tests in their suite. I didn't do the gaming test on this because it's not a gaming machine. It has just UHD 620 or 630 graphics in it. But the battery test, both of the tests I ran with the brightness cranked up to more than 50%. It was at 180 lux, which is somewhere around 50-60% on this particular machine. 14 hours of battery life, constant.
That's pretty impressive.
Use. Yeah, and
it's a beautiful machine.
Yeah, it is, and it's in that understated way. And I was a long-time user of a ThinkPad myself. Around 2013, 2014, I jumped on the ThinkPad Yoga bandwagon. And so I had the first generation ThinkPad Yoga X1. And while this is not a 360 wraparound hinge design like that one was, it's still like the hinge is like 180 degrees. It folds flat if you want it to. It doesn't have a touch screen. But what it has is virtually the same keyboard. I really liked that keyboard layout. It's full width. The keys feel comfortable. They're all concave on the top, so your fingers sort of rest in them. There's a decent amount of key travel. It's still technically sort of a chiclet style as far as the weight of them and like the overall size and the what is it called, key travel. But it doesn't feel like it. It feels just a little bit more traditional than that. It's hard to explain. And until you use one of these, you don't kind of realize what the deal is. Like, no, this is not the old IBM ThinkPad. No, this is not one of those legendary keyboards that people still swear by that have tons of key travel and feel clicky. But for a modern keyboard, when we have keyboards released that have flat top chiclet keys that all feel exactly the same, that move less than a millimeter before they actuate, and it's a different experience to use one of these. So I really like that. The trackpad is good too. How good can a plastic trackpad be in the age of giant glass trackpads? Yeah, pretty good. It's responsive. The software is good. This doesn't feel laggy. I never felt like I was fighting the trackpad. It just kind of got out of my way, so I didn't think about it anymore, which is ideal for me because I'm extremely picky about trackpads. And it has the the little nub too. I can never remember exactly what they call that. That's the track point, I think. They call the touchpad the Ultra Nav, and they call the nub the track point, I think. And that feels great too. And you have physical buttons for it down below the space bar too. Left and right click buttons, which are just above the trackpad itself. So I thought it was great. It was, to me, about as perfect as a business-oriented laptop gets. Super long battery life, really small. 14-inch form factor, but with like small bezels, it's like a 13-inch size. It fits great. You're sitting in coach using a laptop, it fits. You have no issues. So I gave this my like laptop of the year recommendation just from everything I used. And I really liked things like the HP Spectre X360, but it's not, the style of it's a little odd, and it's one of those where it's trying really hard to be a slim aluminum, almost Apple-like design, and it has only USB-C. Well, actually, that one was the exception because it had a single USB 3.1 port on it, but you're still not dealing with full-size video output or the capability of actual like gigabit NIC like this one has. And then the last thing I'll say is the screen. The screen was really great. I actually gave up using my old ThinkPad Yoga S1 because that one had a blinking backlight, like a PWM backlight, where below a certain threshold of brightness, the screen, to lower its brightness, simply blinks the backlight on and off very, very fast. And many, many monitors do this. The first thing, in fact, that I ever asked somebody who's talking about, I get headaches, I have to stare at a computer monitor all day at work. My wife was doing this too, like a year ago, like, I have such a headache from staring at my monitor all day. Like, I bet you have a PWM monitor. So we looked into it. She gave me the model number. Sure enough, she did. And I'm like, take one of these non-PWM monitors that I bought to work with you. Put it in the office. Because unless you set their brightness up to full, it starts to blink more and more and more and more, like slowly. And it would give me a migraine. I finally figured out a couple CESs ago that it was my laptop that was making me feel like I had to die. So these newer ones, no PWM backlight. It's great. The screen is super rich looking. I'm not sure if they're using IGZO or not. I had the low power version. They called it IPS. I think it was Notebook Check that said they thought they were using IGZO. I have no idea. The sub-pixel pattern doesn't match what I thought IGZO was, which is Sharp's technology. It's something I first saw on the Dell XPS 15 a couple years ago. But I call it sort of quasi-OLED, where you have very, very rich color saturation and good contrast ratio, but it's also a lower power technology. So anyway, the only drawback of this, it was $1,700, the one they sent me, which I sent back. It was sad. I had to put it back in the box and send it away. They started around $1,400. This is not a cheap laptop. If you think the XPS 13 at $1,000 is expensive, you're $1,399 and up for this. They do have an AMD variant, and I have seen some lower cost variants of this. I'm not sure they're the exact same model. I thought I saw these as low as $799, but it wouldn't be exactly the same. You'd lose out on things like probably it would be a lower end processor. It would be non-backlit keyboard.
Right.
But they have a whole bunch of stuff in this T-Series family now. I thought this was great, obviously. And it's almost alarmingly light.
Alarmingly light. The kind of light you've dreamed of. It's good stuff.